السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحضور الكرام، بدأ الحلم كبيراً حين انطلق مجلس إرثي للحرف المعاصرة، إحدى مبادرات مؤسسة نماء للارتقاء بالمرأة، برؤية وقيادة قرينة صاحب السمو حاكم الشارقة سمو الشيخة جواهر بنت محمد القاسمي، رئيسة مؤسسة نماء للارتقاء بالمرأة والمؤسسة والرئيسة الفخرية لمجلس إرثي للحرف المعاصرة. وبفضل دعم سموها اللامحدود لجهود المجلس، يعمل مجلس إرثي للحرف المعاصرة على البرامج والمشاريع التي تهدف لحفاظ وإحياء التراث الحرفي ودعم مجتمع الحرفيات بطرق وأساليب حديثة. إن تمكين النساء الحرفيات لا يمكن أن يتحقق دون نشر الوعي بدور الحرف في تعزيز التواصل. ومن خلال لقائنا اليوم نأمل أن يقدم هذا الحوار فرصاً جديدة للمزيد من التعاون والعمل المشترك للارتقاء بدور المرأة الحرفية لتحقيق التواصل بين ثقافات العالم. أود أن أتقدم بالشكر لفريق إكسبو دبي وجناح المرأة بالتعاون مع كارتيه على إتاحه لنا فرصة المشاركة وتوفير هذه المنصة لتعزيز التواصل بين المؤسسات المحلية والدولية للعمل والحفاظ على أهمية المكانة المهنية والاجتماعية للمرأة. كما أود أن أتقدم بالشكر لكم حضورنا الأعزاء على دعمكم ومساهمتكم لاستمرار الجهود المبذولة لمواصلة العمل على المشاريع الثقافية والتنموية، وأخص بالشكر للمتحدثين المشاركين اليوم ممن لهم جهود في الحفاظ على التراث الحرفي في مختلف الثقافات وتوفير مستقبل مستدام للحرف والحرفيين. ونتمنى أن يكون لقاءنا هذا مثمر. وشكرا. We have with us here today Her Excellency Reem Karem, Director of Nama Women Advancement Establishment, Sheikh Habibi Al-Sabah, Chairperson of Sedu Society in Kuwait, Her Excellency Rosie Greenlees, the Executive Director of the Crafts Council in UK, and Mr. Maiwan Jabar Khil, the CEO and Board Member of Fatma bin Mohammed bin Zayed Initiative, and myself, Fatma Dimas from Irthi Contemporary Crafts Council, as the moderator. To open the discussion, I would like to invite our panelists to introduce themselves further and their respective practices and their institutions' efforts within the cultural field. I'd like to start by highlighting the significance of knowledge transfer and cross-cultural exchanges. Similarly, how we're all sitting here today to shed light on our collective practices. We can start with Her Excellency Reem Karem.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure being here with you all today, and pleasure to meet all the panelists, Sheikh Habibi Al-Sabah and Rosie. It's a pleasure having you all on this panel with us today. My name is Reem Karem, and I am the Director of NAMA and also the Director of Irthi Contemporary Craft Council. Irthi Contemporary Craft Council was created in 2015 under the patronage of Her Highness Sheikha Jawahar bint Muhammad Al-Qasimi, the wife of the ruler of Sharjah, patron of Irthi Contemporary Craft Council. The whole idea behind Irthi Contemporary Craft Council came about from one woman, and an elderly woman who met Her Highness in one of Her Highness's visits in the eastern regions. And this old lady actually came to Her Highness and presented Her Highness with a beautifully crafted handbag. And Her Highness was very impressed with the art, with the handcraft and the detail in the bag itself. And so Her Highness turned around to back then Sharjah Businesswomen Council and said, why don't we create a program that would help support these ladies economically? And so Irthi Contemporary Craft Council was created 5 years later. Today we are on par with the rest of the world in terms of supporting artisans economically and making sure that we transfer the knowledge not only via our centers where we train our elderly or artisans, however, but also we are focusing on Hirfati, which is targeting towards youth and children. Then we also have Azyami that is focused on fashion designers in the UAE, upcoming fashion designers, in order to basically upscale their talents and actually show them and introduce them to the fashion world. Last but not least, we also have our research centers where we are constantly documenting all the crafts in the UAE in order to preserve them from dying, number one, and trying to elevate them and modernizing them for them to suit today's market, and that majority of that market is youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sheikh Habibi Al-Sabah, would you kindly go next?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First, I would love to thank for this opportunity. It's always, always, always much appreciated to connect with like-minded organizations. I'll give you a brief about Al-Sadu Society. Al-Sadu Weaving Society is a cooperative. It's a self-sustained organization that is dedicated to preserving, documenting, and promoting the textile heritage of Kuwait. I'll just give you a few of our goals and missions: to preserve and safeguard and document Kuwait's textile and weaving inheritance for prosperity, and to promote the creative and innovative crafts and skills of the past generations, and to be a leading educational and resource center, opening our archives and our studies and our publications, and to serve local artisans through educational materials and programs. And the most important being revitalizing the production of the traditional handmade textiles in Kuwait. I'm speaking as a person with more than 10 years of experience in this field, but not necessarily what I had studied. Just to give you a brief about how I work within the society, it's run by a board of members, and the patron and the co-founder is my mother, Sheikha Altaf Salim Sabah. And I had a different career, but this kind of pulled me back into it, seeing this beautiful heritage that needed to be safeguarded, needed to be shown to a relevant new generation. So what I'll be discussing today is from practical rather than theoretical experience.
Thank you, Sheikh Habibi. Your Excellency Rosie Greenies, could you please elaborate more on the work that the Crafts Council does in the UK?
Thank you, and thank you so much for inviting me to this session. I'm really looking forward to hearing what my colleagues have got to say. So, as has already been mentioned, I'm the director of the British Crafts Council. We're a national charity. We work across the UK. We have some government funding, and we also raise funds ourselves. This will be our 50th year. So we were established 50 years ago alongside a number of other important crafts councils around the world, such as the Irish Crafts Council and the American Crafts Council. Our commitment and our belief is that craft skills can enrich us and uplift us as individuals, and that by doing that, we can actually change the world through craft. We think that craft has incredible value in society, economically, socially, and culturally. And so our particular focus is on exploring ways in which we can articulate that, show the value of it, and demonstrate that in terms of things like health and well-being, in terms of scientific innovation, education, and so forth. We do three broad things. We champion craft. We do that through our public programs, our collection of objects, and our gallery, and a whole series of events and participation projects. We're very focused on education. We believe that children have the right and should be given a craft education, an opportunity to engage in making and craft skills. And we work in schools, at higher education level, and with adult education. And thirdly, growing the market for craft. That's about supporting the sector, supporting craft businesses to be sustainable, to be effective as businesses and as artistic practices. And also to support the sector more broadly. We do a lot of research and policy advocating for craft in our country. Thank you.
Firstly, thank you very much for having us here. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm very happy to be here at the EXPO, finally. One of our founding members, Her Excellency Reem Al-Hashmi, put a lot of effort into this and a lot of hard work. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here today, sharing our story with you. Thank you very much. The Fatima bint Mohammed bin Zayed initiative was founded in 2010, and the aim is to support and grow grassroots development and community development in Afghanistan. So the project itself runs in Afghanistan. We have 4 main pillars. The first pillar is healthcare. We provide basic health services to thousands of people across the country. And in the month of August, which, as you know, was a very difficult month for Afghanistan, we provided healthcare services to more than 22,500 individuals across the country. So we continue our operations today as well. The second pillar is education. Since 2010, FBMI has put more than 20,000 children back into education through supporting the high schools and staying in touch with them to make sure that the children are attending school and their progress, monitoring their progress as well. Aside from this, we provide hygiene, literacy training to the mothers as well, the families and the communities. The third pillar is arts and culture. So we work to preserve arts and culture. And the fourth is strategic advisory. So we work shoulder to shoulder with international organizations, NGOs, and a range of other organizations and governments to promote sustainable development. We have 2 social enterprises that support FBMI. FBMI itself has been sustainable since 2010. We've employed more than 8,000 individuals across Afghanistan, 70% of which are women. The first is Zuleya. Zuleya works to promote handicrafts and in particular handmade carpets. The women and the men that we employ weave handmade carpets and they're promoted worldwide. And the second is called Mira. Mira was launched in 2020 and the aim is to support farmers in Afghanistan. Both enterprises support our mission with the initiative, keeping it sustainable over the years. Thank you.
Thank you. So now that we've talked more about knowledge transfer, the importance of providing through sustainability and focusing on sustainability and innovation, I'd like to look more closely at the different entities, initiatives, and how we're designed in a way, in a framework that actually serves the sustainability development goals. Your Excellency, Reem, could you please elaborate more on the initiatives at the Council and how we've been working in line with sustainability and innovation?
I think at Irthi Contemporary Craft Council, we understand the value of sustainability and the importance of sustainability and creating an actual economy out of sustainability. Now, when we look into the different aspects, there are so many layers to Irthi. Sometimes when we come to explain it, we even get confused. But what we can say for sure is that if we are looking into our culture, it was always sustainable. Our tradition was sustainable. Everything that they used or our grandparents used to use was sustainable. Now, what we were trying to do here in Irthi Contemporary Craft Council is to document this whole history, because we realized that if we were looking at natural dyes, this is exactly what they were using long time before. So it's not, we're not reinventing the wheel. This exists there, but it's only a matter of documenting it and repackaging it and presenting it to today's world, that we can actually try to make these efforts where they're more relatable to the younger audience. On another, where every project that comes to us, and we had a collaboration with 1971 in Sharjah, where they had an exhibition and we participated in it. And in this exhibition, we actually were dealing with Dr. Sandra Pajsek and also the Institute of Natural Fibers and Medicinal Plants and Brunel University. And the reason why we created that kind of collaboration is to look into how palm waste can be used to create sustainable biotextiles. And today, we're very proud that I think today they'll be circulating it, or in the next session? On Thursday. So make sure to come by so you will see the end product by then. And to us, this is only kind of a peek into what we can do. As a council, what we aim to do and how we aim to preserve it is endless, and the techniques are endless. The studies and the sciences that people are coming up with are endless. But we are definitely aiming and focusing on sustainability. We are definitely focusing on reviving the dying crafts. But mostly, I think what's very important for all of us present here today is to start documenting. Data is what we lack in this part of the world, and this is what we are trying to focus on and drive through Irthi Contemporary Craft Council. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Rosie Greenlees, could you please elaborate a little bit more about the initiatives that you mentioned and the different practices and how you carry them out in a sustainable framework?
So I think our starting point is that, as have already been mentioned, I think, is that craft has many of the characteristics and attributes of sustainability in the broad sense. The careful use of materials, the length of an object's last. We know that people like to buy craft because of its provenance, where they know where it's come from, they know who's made it. We recently did a major piece of research into the market for craft in the UK, and we know from that that increasingly there is a younger generation who buy craft, but also are very much responsible consumers. They want to know where the materials have come from, they want to know who the maker is, how they've made it, and they want the air miles to be as short as possible. In other words, they like to buy local. So we've always believed that craft has a role to play in promoting sustainability, and I think what we're trying to do is increase that promotion and demonstrate that actually it can contribute in that way. I think the second thing to say is that through the issue of climate change, we also believe that we can use craft as a tool to encourage people to think about the choices that they make and the things that they buy, and that craft-made objects can be an alternative to fast fashion and all of those badly made objects that people tend to buy or have bought in the past out of bad materials and so forth. So that is something that we're going to be doing more of in the future. We want to look at our environmental responsibility for ourselves as an organisation for the sector and to support the sector in ensuring that they're thinking about how they address those issues within their own practice, and indeed then how we can use craft to promote those issues with the wider public. I think the other interesting thing about craft is that, and this is something we've been working on for about 10 years now, is our innovation work. And this is really about this principle that craft skills, material knowledge can actually be used in really cutting edge science and technology. So, for example, we've worked with a glass artist who, for example, was responsible for developing a set of glass moulds for a throat transplant, for example. We know that there are lots of new materials being developed which actually help in terms of addressing climate change, for example, biotextiles, all of those sorts of wider issues relating to materials and craft skills. So we're very engaged with that because we think that that's a really important way in which craft can have meaning now, and some of those older, more established traditional processes can be revitalised and used in these new contexts and contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Sheikh Habibi, would you please talk a little bit more about the Seti program and how it's been approached, where you're merging between contemporary and heritage craft of Sedu, but in a sustainable manner to preserve and prolong the practice of Sedu?
Yes, we have the Sedu Art and Design Initiative, Seti. It was envisioned, the idea of it was back in 1988 when a contemporary fine artist, Sami Mohammed, came and interacted with our weavers. And he wanted to have bolder colors with abstract patterns laid apart. And it was a very long process. And at the end of, during the exhibition, we saw that the people who came in were very excited about the outcome. They saw traditional Sedu in a new way. So back in 2016, we revisited this experience, and we have a collective artist residency where they go through workshops and lectures, and through our library and our archives and our permanent collection, and they come up with contemporary pieces inspired by Sedu, with each year having a different theme. So one was sustainability, one is about the rhythm of the weaving, One, the last one we had was about connectivity because it was during the COVID pandemic. And each year a different theme gives them something to pull out from this beautiful craft. And if I can just go back into the sustainability, I know you had mentioned before that the nomadic lifestyle is 100% sustainable, from the shelter to the food. So we want to go back to that. We want to be a self-sufficient industry in itself. The weaver herself never did everything from A to Z. There were the men who sheared the goats, the camels, the sheep, and then there were the spinners, the dyers, and then the weavers. So in terms of innovation, we're trying to come up with better spinning facilities. We're coming up with better organic dyes and contemporizing the loom itself. It's a very simple horizontal loom. We're playing around with going vertical with different ways of presenting this loom and within the woven fabric structure itself. So the innovation comes hand in hand with all the changes that are happening.
Thank you, Sheikh Habibi. Before we move to the next point, I'd like Mr. Maiwan to elaborate more on sustainability and how you've been approaching it, maybe especially because you're working with remote artisans, not necessarily artisans that are based here.
Thank you. Sustainability, the way we saw sustainability at FBMI, it took us a couple of years to study the model itself. We operate in Afghanistan, so the model is very different. What we need to do first is we need to look at the markets. We need to make sure that there's markets available for these products, even before we start designing or developing or branding the product. That's the most important. We learned from a lot of previous mistakes others did. There was aid that came to Afghanistan. There were people who obviously tried to do a lot of good as well. There was a provincial reconstruction team who went to one of the provinces, employed 30 ladies, gave them the loom up front, the materials. When they came back a month later, the ladies had sold everything in the market because they needed the money. So that's not how you keep it sustainable. You know, we learned a lot from what went on previous 10 years. So we thought the other way around. We thought this circle has to be full. We have to have a full circle where each point is addressed accordingly. And the first one, of course, is the market. You know, we realized that if we were to just keep making carpets, handmade carpets, we're keeping the craft alive, we're keeping tradition alive, cultural practices as well. But the main issue was there would be no buyer. So we went and searched the international markets, both in the United States, the Americas, here in the GCC as well, Europe. So that was the foundation of what we developed as an initiative. The second was when we looked at the employees themselves, the ladies, they had lots of challenges. The issue was not just paying them fair wages. We realized we could pay them fair wages, we could pay them more than the market, but they had problems at home. So we realized we need to address the problems they have at home to begin with. And that started with, traditionally, the ladies would weave handmade carpets, but there'd be children in the house and they couldn't keep them quiet. So they used to feed them opium. So from a young age, the babies were drug addicts, unfortunately. So we thought there has to be a way to address this as well. We can't have the ladies working in the homes if they're not being looked after. And the second thing was, as I mentioned from the case study at the beginning, we needed to hire the right people, have the right management to make sure we're monitoring, not just monitoring the employees, but monitoring the progress, the project, our social services as well. So I feel sustainability is full circle. We have to address everything if you want to keep it sustainable. That includes the marketing, the branding, the management, of course, and the well-being of the employees. A fair wage will not just support, will not be sustainable. So we learned from many mistakes that others made in the past to keep the project sustainable and running. And from the beginning, we haven't relied on a single donation or a single handout. The initial investment that we made has been sustainable the past 11 years. And indirectly, we've benefited more than 1 million Afghans. As I mentioned, just in the month of August, whilst the war was going on, 22,500 people, more than that, received access to life-saving critical healthcare. That's incredible considering what was going on in the country at the time. And to put it into context for one of the other great partners that worked there, they were only able to target 7,500. So what we have to do is we have to look at the circle in its full capacity and address every single point one by one. In terms of the crafts, of course, we have to realize that the traditional designs will not sell, of course. The traditional designs are never going to continue selling, unfortunately. There has to be a good mix between good design as well and the sustainability aspect, which we've tried to exploit as much as possible in terms of having good designs, having good sustainable materials as well, and making sure that the story is told. The ladies that we empower, you know, they're very, very talented. We have to make sure that we get them to tell their stories to the world.
Thank you. I think all of you mentioned a few points that are actually very relevant to creating sustainability or achieving sustainability. We have to work in a circular manner and really combine different efforts. So it's not just looking at it from one angle. Which brings me to my next point, which did come up with Her Excellency Rosie Greenlees, and she did mention the importance of innovation. So the past couple of years have imposed a lot of challenges on us, especially with the pandemic, and it has shifted the landscape we operate within, and it's forced our entities culturally and operation-wise to create new strategies to operate. So I think my question for this is for you to shed light on the importance of marrying technology with craft and how important it is to have innovation in craft and not just presented in the traditional heritage manner. And I'm not sure if all of you can see the audience. This question I'm asking Ms. Reem to reflect further on the virtual environment we have here, and we're happy to show you more samples after the panel discussion, where we've actually taken traditional handicrafts of Irthi, and I'd like Her Excellency Reem to elaborate more on technology with craft.
Thank you, Fatma. I think the past 2 years made us shift in the way we think and on how we approach artisans, on how we approach life itself. And I think we always go back to the artisans. And the minute the pandemic hit, we actually had a meeting with them, discussed with them on how we would like to move forward. Now, keeping in mind the artisans that we work with in Irthi Contemporary Craft Council are paid per piece. We have others already that exist on our payroll that used to come every day and produce on a daily basis for Irthi Contemporary Craft Council, and they would be paid accordingly. They were on a salary base. So when we sadly had to shut down the centers, what we did is to take these elderly ladies back to their houses to make sure that they're safe, but at the same time teach them on how to operate technology. Was challenging, but the beauty of it is that they were loving the change, and they took that as a challenge. When we were freaking out, they were the ones calming us down. I think they've gone through it before, and you know, I don't know, maybe there was another pandemic at some point in life, but their resilience is what kept us going. And I think it was only just for us to keep the ball rolling, keep the productions going on, because alhamdulillah, Irthi throughout the pandemic, on the contrary, people shut down. We actually had so much time to produce and mass produce. But then we wanted to show it and showcase this work to the world. And as you said, it's useless and pointless if we only are asking these ladies to produce beautiful work without showcasing it or showing it or sharing it with the rest of the world. And so what we did is, that was our first challenge, is how to create a virtual gallery. And so the team got together, we started dealing with a lot of companies that are basically into, who could create 3D kind of galleries. But we did not want that gallery to also be very out there and, you know, something from our imagination. We actually wanted a real life gallery. So what we took one of the museums in Al-Humriya in Sharjah, and they worked with us. The team worked, the company actually worked with us, and this is where we had a 360 kind of view of the entire gallery in Humriya in Sharjah, and where we displayed all the works of the Farruha, and it was the embroidery crafts collection. And then we started sharing the link with everyone. And the beauty of it is that people actually started coming to us during the pandemic and saying, can we have the name of the company? We'd really like to do that. And this is, I think, how we kept the ball rolling and how we managed to showcase our work. Now, if we say, as you said, Fatma, we cannot say crafts without technology today. Whether there is a pandemic, whether there is not a pandemic, the only way we can actually transfer the knowledge is via technology, sadly. If you want the youth or the children to be interested, it's got to be something on technology. This is the only thing that we can grasp their attention with. And hopefully soon you will be seeing a lot from Irthi in terms of technology and how we're going to be utilizing that different types of technology to sustain Irthi Contemporary Craft Council's crafts, and also on another side start looking for smarter ways to document and create archives, digital archives, when it comes to preserving of the crafts.
Thank you. Your Excellency Rosie, could you please elaborate a little bit about the challenges that happened when you had to shift the Collect Fair exhibition to a virtual exhibition? And as far as my knowledge, this February, it's going to be a hybrid exhibition in the UK, back in its normal location.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, like everybody else, we had to pivot very quickly following the pandemic to working online. A lot of makers and craft businesses in the UK already have some sort of digital presence. For those that did, they were actually quite successful in continuing to sell their work. But those who haven't already done that found it very difficult to start to do that in the middle of the pandemic. There was also a huge wave of support from people who actually actively went and bought from makers because they recognised how difficult it was for craftspeople during the pandemic. So in a strange way, some people did extremely well out of it. I think also the whole idea of how you can teach and you can be involved in craft online, you can look at it online, you can buy it online. Craft offers itself in a really positive way to social media because it's very visual, it's about stories. All of that lends itself to things like Instagram and Twitter and all of these other types of platforms. Collect is our major international fair. We do it every year. It's normally a physical event. And whilst we would have a digital presence, it would be quite limited. We had been hoping that we were going to be able to do a physical fair this year, but obviously it became very apparent that that wasn't possible. So we moved to a digital platform. We worked with Artsy, which some people may be aware of, is a selling platform which works a lot with contemporary art fairs. And so we had a virtual fair. We had a whole series of events and talks and so forth in exactly the same way that we would have done if we had a physical fair, but that was all done virtually. And as a consequence, huge reach. We had people from all over the world attending the talks and visiting the platform. We made sales. We also did all of the things that we would have done if we'd had a physical fair. So we had patrons and collectors having one-to-one meetings with galleries and with makers. So all of the sort of VIP type of activity that we would have done in a physical fair, we did virtually instead. And last but not least, we have a gallery here, and so we had a member of staff in the gallery surrounded by work who then would use that space as a link really for all of the other events. I think that was quite important to have some sort of physical base at least. So for us, I think, you know, the shift to digital was already there. We were already doing that work, but it's absolutely accelerated it. There's no question of that. The other thing that we did was to run a lot of online seminars, workshops, one-to-ones with craft businesses to give them support through what was a very difficult time, but also to run programs of training in terms of how to digitize, how to sell yourself online, how to market, how to construct your business plan, all of those different things that you need to think about when you're selling on an online platform rather than physically. The last thing I'll say is that the piece of research that I mentioned earlier into the market for craft, what was interesting about that is that we know from that is that a lot of people do engage with craft digitally, but also people do want to see it physically as well. So it's both. We need both things. It's not one or the other. It's actually the combination of the two, so that people can see something online and then go and look at it physically, or look at something physically and then buy it online. It's also about that engagement with the maker, talking to the maker, meeting them, all of those things that the physical offers. So I don't think we're going to be in a world of only digital, but I think that digital brings huge benefits to the sector and to makers.
Thank you. Yes, I think on that note, we would all agree that it's really important that we maintain the shared experience, because what we offer as cultural institutions is not only preservation of crafts, but we're also taking these crafts to the people. We're making it accessible. I think the pandemic or the past few years has given us an opportunity to experiment with different outlets and different ways to reach people. And it helped us discover as cultural institutions that you can reach an audience and you can generate awareness about crafts, not only in the physical setting where you display different artworks and products, but also by reaching them digitally. And from that, we realized that there's been a new form of a dialogue that's been presented. And there's a larger interest from the audience and different consumers to have locally handmade or artisan-made products. And this dialogue has been established between artisans, artists, and designers. And all of our institutions collectively have either worked with artists and designers, paired artisans and artists. So I'd like Your Excellency, Reem, please to talk a little bit more about this dialogue that has happened between the artisans and contemporary designers or artists.
I think the dialogue came across when Irthi started creating partnerships with international bodies. So the only way we could elevate the skill of these artisans is by showcasing their work internationally and challenging them. So we would go to them and say, well, you know, we've got an invitation to showcase in London. Who's interested? Definitely they showed the interest, but they're like, what do we have to produce? We're like, well, you've got to produce something that's going to be up there in terms of quality, because no one else wants to see anything else, anything mediocre. And so I think that's what started the challenge, internal challenge, and the motivating drive. It started with London Design Fair, and surprisingly is when we sent the samples to participate, you had to send samples. And when the team, I remember in London Design Fair, back then it was Jimmy, and the team actually saw the samples that we sent, and they're like, they were blown away with the details. They were blown away with the quality that was given. And so then we received a letter from them saying, we would like Sharjah to represent the United Arab Emirates, and you will be the guest, and Sheikh Fahim was with us in that exhibition. And we were very honored, and we felt very proud of the quality that the ladies have and the artisans were producing. And so from there, we started engaging them with more international kind of platforms. And this is where they started upscaling, elevating, taking the challenge. Instead of producing, let's say, 2 pieces per week, they were each one was producing 4. So they were challenging themselves because they wanted to be seen. They were proud all of a sudden from someone who sits at home and does this little kind of handicraft on her, on the weekend, or just for her own kind of usage, to now being seen internationally. And it was beautiful when they would compete with one another on who produces more and who produces the best, and to a point where we actually used to overhear them say, well, no, you've done this wrong, you need to undo this and do it again, because this is not going to be acceptable. So now they've actually elevated their standards without us going back and saying, well, you've got to redo this. For them to understand this, it was very important for us. And then what happened is we continued collaborating, and not only showcasing, but now we started collaborating and producing material that were wearable. So in 2020 and 2021, we worked with the London-based fashion house, Qasimi. and where we started producing the traditional Safifa weaving, the farruha weaving technique into the brand's spring-summer collection. And so I'm not sure if you guys saw the collection, but it's out there, and feel free to purchase because you are supporting two beautiful initiatives. And then we started, I think this is where we started looking at each other internally, and we were like, when we got approached by Cartier and in Ramadan last year, and they actually wanted us to collaborate with them to produce Safifa baskets, where they would be sharing these gifts for their guests. And so we all took a step back, and this was Ramadan, and I remember one of our colleagues, Farah, we were on a Zoom meeting, and they're like, she's like, you wouldn't guess who called us. And we're like, who? So she's like, Cartier. We're like, and? So she's like, they want to collaborate. We're like, no way. So we were all so excited, but then we're like, we're there. We've made it. But it's not us. It's these women that we are supporting and have been supporting for the past 6 years. And it's Her Highness's vision that is today a reality. And so today we take it upon ourselves is to continuously train these individuals, showcase, and the only way to sustain, and I think collaboration is key to success. And when we start supporting one another, it means that we are actually able to cross any boundary, overcome any kind of limitation. And I think what's beautiful to see is the more we collaborate, the more we get younger artisans involved. And it's not only the artisans of a certain age category. Now we've got the young artists who are also involved in Irthi because of that collaboration with Cartier. And so we've got more artisans showing up and artists wanting to collaborate and to create more.
Thank you. Mr. Maiwan, there's the Zuliya project that you mentioned, and recently you opened applications for young designers to send in designs. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you approach developing the designs for the carpets? And is there a form of resistance maybe from the artisan communities when they receive contemporary designs?
Sure. I think, technology-wise, it's always a challenge because you can't force people to start weaving carpets all of a sudden if they don't want to. For the past 5 years, when we ask our employees what they do with the salaries that they receive, 99% of them say that we put our brothers and sisters and kids into education with it so that they can learn computer skills, so that they can learn English, for example. So what we've done, especially in terms of trying to keep the heritage alive, keep carpet weaving alive, is that we've sort of thought, let's invest in technology as a means of sales. So we've boosted our online presence. At Abu Dhabi Art in November, we'll be launching our first ever NFTs. So the carpets will become NFTs as well. The first one will be the Peace and Tolerance carpet, which was gifted to the Pope, His Holiness the Pope. And we've opened up the floor to people globally, regionally and globally, to participate and provide designs to people who are willing to weave. In a sense, we're in a way lucky that we have a lot of people who need jobs in Afghanistan and a lot of people that require the services and the benefits that we provide to them as well. For the future, of course, we can't stop people from learning how to do computer-aided design, which we've trained, and we have our staff using iPad now. So they do the crafts by hand and they do it by computer and iPad as well. So the weavers are using iPads. That's a form of developing their capacity as well. In terms of the program, the beauty is that the employees we have, some of them we train ourselves to learn the skills. The majority have the skills already passed down through generations. And when they receive the designs, they always have comments, but good comments. Can we change A with B? Can we implement our own ideas, of course? And the success of that has been seen in our Peace and Tolerance carpet collection. We have a Peace and Tolerance carpet collection that doesn't have a graph. It doesn't have a design. Our weavers, they weave from their mind. They weave peace, they weave beautiful carpets, really. And it's been very, very well received. As I mentioned, the Pope received one as well. And our latest project, which is for the year of 50, invites local UAE-based artists to provide designs that will then be woven into carpets, and a few will also be made into NFTs as well. So there's a huge willingness to work in the arts and the culture. In terms of preservation, we're working on an online cultural museum as well, where we'll try to preserve everything online. But things have been very, very well received so far. We've been very lucky in that sense.
Thank you. I think to move to the next point of discussion, I really want to highlight and stress the importance of documenting. And because you said about the museum, online museum, it's really important to have an archive that houses all the efforts that we do in terms of the process of weaving and how, for example, you said now the artisans are more comfortable using technology while they're weaving. I think I would like to invite all the guests to, our speakers, to unpack this question together in terms of documentation and how important the role of documenting and archiving, or what role the documenting and archiving plays in preserving cultural heritage handicrafts and also making them accessible. Because, for example, when you talk about the NFTs, there's a huge audience today for that. And then when you mentioned the online museum, you're literally taking the craft to the audience from the comfort of their home. So collectively, could you please unpack the question on how important archiving is?
If I could just go first very quickly, based on our experience, it has to be based on respect. With our team that's local there, with the people that we employ in Afghanistan, for example, it's based on respect. I think in the West it works very differently. Of course, you have IPs and trademarks and paperwork, but I'll give you a very small example. Our color dyer, the person who dyes the yarns, he doesn't want to give us anything because it's been passed down from generation to generation. He doesn't want to give us his recipes, or he doesn't want to teach anybody else either, except his own son. So we respect this. We give him a space. He's part of the family. We treat him as a family. And that's the key, I think, especially working in volatile environments or environments that are challenging. Respect plays a very big role. And that's what we've been able to do. We've been able to give them the freedom, the capacity, the support, and the love that they need to be able to keep on and hold on to their trademarks and keep it theirs. So we've respected that. We've given them their space. And you know, when you look after your employees as a family, they give you wonderful artwork. They're pieces of art. They really are. So I think in terms of what we've been doing, it's based on respect.
I think just to add on what you said before our other speakers comment, I think the fact that we have to protect our artisans' intellectual property comes from the respectful practice and ethical trade as well. And I think that works hand in hand with documentation and archiving, because we're not only archiving the craft or a product, we're also archiving the recipes, like you said, or the traditions that these people hold very close to heart. So, Your Excellency, Reem, would you like to?
So when we started doing Irthi Contemporary Craft Council, especially in the Telly, now we had 12 Telly designs known within the UAE. Today we have more than 60 new designs, and all of those have been basically designed by the artisans that we have. And each and every one of those have been named according to what they decide to name it, because it's their creation. And I think it's very important to include them and to create a kind of an inclusive approach to documentation, rather than doing it from just a one-sided kind of approach. And it's very also important is when we started, when we were asked to create something called Irthi Contemporary Craft Council, we were looking around the Melissa region for any type of information that would help us establish something similar. We had no one to benchmark against. We had no one, because we lacked, the country lacked, or let's say the region lacked in terms of information, in terms of documentation of certain crafts. And so we took it upon ourselves to start documenting everything. And today, actually, you will be seeing two of Farruha and embroidery documentations that we're creating into, eventually they're going to be kind of, coffee table kind of collection. feel free to go through it, and please make sure that you actually preserve this, because this is actually, we are creating history as we speak right now. So thank you very much.
Sheikh Habibi, would you like to elaborate a little bit more on the efforts that you do through the Seti Society in documenting the craft and the traditional heritage of Kuwait?
I agree with you that documentation is the most important and the first step in preserving a craft. But to build a strong foundation and for the archiving and documentation, from that foundation, you can pull the information to help set up the structure based whether you want to sustain the craft or you want to transfer the skills. For example, 3 years back, we created a national curriculum introduced in the public schools in the state of Kuwait in the arts sector. It's called the Art of Weaving. And we had a full curriculum set up and developed by Seti Society using all the years of experience and knowledge that was gathered. So I don't know if I had mentioned it, the project started in the early 80s. So more than 40 years of experience and 30 years being set up as a co-op. So we do have a lot of publications, a lot of studies, and this helped us also transfer the skill of weaving. As has mentioned before earlier, the craftsmen and the weavers are very resistant to transferring their skills. It's something that is passed on from generation to generation and something very secretive. They wouldn't tell you all the terms and the complex ways of doing a pattern. To them, it gives them, they lose the edge. They feel that they're threatened. Maybe someone else can do this pattern better than them. So with trust, with a lot of years of experience, and with them seeing how everything is cited and referenced with a weaver's name, they grew to tell us the secrets behind it. So this helped create a national curriculum. This helped create a transfer program where we're generating a new generation of weavers. So definitely, this wouldn't have happened without the years of documentation.
Thank you, Sheikh Habibi. Your Excellency, Rosie, could you just shed some light on a form of documentation that takes place through the Crafts Council, which is creating the crafts stories and working with local communities around the UK to contribute to stories on crafts and that are also featured in the Journal of Crafts?
So we have a variety of ways that we record. We have a collection, so all of the objects in our collection are archived, and we keep all of the materials relating to those objects as well as the objects themselves. So that is enormously important in being able to tell the story. We've also done a lot of oral history projects, talking to makers whose work is in the collection about their work and how they make their work, all of that. We think it's really important that digital technology, again, is hugely significant here, because actually an awful lot of people record and talk about process and ways of making online. So that's very important too. And I just wanted to mention one other thing through the World Crafts Council in the Asia Pacific region. And this was one of a project which Dr. Hajawid Kadumi was leading on, who very sadly died earlier this year, but was an encyclopedia whereby they were recording different methods and processes of different crafts across the whole of the Asia Pacific, which I think is a really interesting model as well.
Thank you. So before we move to our last point of the discussion, sadly we're running out of time, we all really touched on the importance of documenting to provide for the audience to make available for future generations of artisans. But I think the last most important thing, and that all of us are collectively working on, is to provide fair trade and wage for the artisans. We want to create a framework that will provide for these artisans and continue the production, but also maintain the circular economy for them, whether it's a piece by rate system or it's a production like you did, but then it's not actually sustainable. but I would really like Sheikh Habibi to elaborate a little bit more on the government in Kuwait are creating a framework to pay the artisans.
In 1988, they met with a lot of UNESCO experts, Ms. Jasleen Damija, and they came up with a way that it had to be a co-op for it to be sustainable. Being an NGO with a craft does not lead to sustainability because at the end it's not a charity. They need to have a circle where they're purchasing, and we're purchasing the pieces and they're getting paid with a very short cash cycle. So in 1991, after the Gulf War, it was turned into a co-op. And this is why the project has been so successful and being sustained over the years. It's the best model to keep the weavers and the artisans engaged because they are the stakeholders. So there is the short-term benefit of it being us purchasing their pieces. There's the long-term benefit is at the end of the year, with every time we have profits, they get dividends. So they get excited about it and they feel like they're part of the process themselves, not as novelty. And sometimes they use cultural appropriation, so they feel part of the team themselves. And we purchase the pieces on a monthly basis. Some go into our permanent collection, while others go into the shop. The weavers are made aware of the small markup to ensure the marketability of the pieces. They prefer to sell their pieces to us rather than engage with customers and the haggling process and the shipping process. So we make it easy for them and we make it easy for the customers. Right before the pandemic, we launched our online shop. And I think there was a novelty also with purchasing very indigenous pieces online. And within 3 months, we had sold out of the larger pieces, which was never the case before. So the best structure is engage the artisan, the weaver within the co-op system.
Thank you. No, please go ahead.
I just wanted to say that we are the only co-op in Kuwait that is of this kind. So we are a bit of a pain to them, but they do give us a lot of perks, such as having a shop, having the facilities to market these pieces, whereas an NGO wouldn't.
Thank you. Mr. Maiwand, would you like to reflect on fair trade and wage before we wrap up?
Yes, thank you. I think there needs to be a very holistic approach, a holistic and a pragmatic approach. As I mentioned earlier, a fair wage is good, but it doesn't solve the entire problem, especially if you want to be sustainable. You need to create an environment that's very good for the staff themselves, your team, your workers, everyone. We started from the homes directly, and I think what's also important is that the framework needs to change from the top. I was once invited to Kurdistan by one of the international agencies that wanted to implement a similar project for Yazidi ladies. And when I got there, they said, look, we had a budget of 500,000 euros. We have 280,000 left and we have 6 months to finish the budget. But so that's not going to work. Straight away, we need to talk about the budgeting. We need to talk about the monetary policies that are involved in such implementation of such projects. We need to change the way money is spent as well, especially if we want to keep projects sustainable. So I think we definitely need to look at the markets, the way the budgets are spent, and also the environment themselves, trying to keep the people employed for as long as we can. And what's very good is that FPMI itself is a very, very proud project for the UAE. We've recently started, there was a forum in 2019 where Bill Gates asked His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed for help in eradicating polio in Afghanistan, and straight away His Highness reached out and said, surely you guys are well respected in the communities because you do community building. That's what we do. We refurbish orphanages, we build mosques, we create small bridges, we buy products. That's how Mira, one of our social enterprises, was actually founded, as a way to eradicate polio, because the international community were not welcome into local homes. So we support them and they give us access. That's one of the main key issues behind the sustainability. We need to have the cycle that keeps the project sustainable, that keeps buyers. And I can assure you worldwide there are several buyers. People are always interested in arts and crafts. There'll never be a shortage as long as you can produce a good quality product, a good design that can be traced back. There will always be buyers for it. So I think a holistic and a very sensible and pragmatic approach is definitely needed for sustainability and preserving arts and crafts.
Thank you very much. And I think this brings us to the end of our discussion today. And I think all the points that you all discussed today really shed light and highlight the importance of working collectively to collaborate and create strategies together so we have a collective vision rather than an individualistic vision. And hopefully we can create this framework where we put our artisans at the focal point and create a circular, sustainable economy for them. Thank you very much to all our respected speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.